Hey everybody. So yesterday I started drafting my story and taking it from the web here that I had planned it out on into a draft. Now I've made it into sentences. So I'm going to read what I have so far and then I'm going to finish drafting my story today. Okay, so I had the most amazing experience in Colorado on vacation. I got to feed real chipmunks. We had to hike to the very top of a mountain. When we got to the top, there were little chipmunks running everywhere. We brought sunflower seeds to feed the chipmunks. Okay, so now I need to see what's next. So in my plan, I had said I was going to write about sitting still and how much fun it was. So it would make the most sense for me to write about how I had to sit still next. Okay, and remember, I can add in other sentences besides what's just in my plan, which is what I'm about to have to do. Okay, so I found a big, go to my next page here. I found a big rock to sit it on. Okay, so I didn't talk about sitting still yet. I just talked about how I found this big rock to sit on. Now I'll talk about sitting still. I sat as still as I could. I sat as still as I could with sunflower seeds in my hand. Okay, now think about my planning here. I've talked about how I had to hike and the food that we brought and how I had to sit still. Oh, my lights came back on. Hopefully they stay on. Okay, next, if I say, it was so much fun, is that going to make sense? I sat as still as I could with sunflower seeds in my hand. It was so much fun. Well, that kind of leaves out a really important part of the story where the chipmunk actually eats sunflower seeds out of my hand. So I may want to add in an extra sentence about that too. Okay. A tiny little chipmunk ran up and I don't think there's room for started there. And started to eat from my hand. Now, do you think that this part would be exciting, or would it just be like the same as the rest of the story? A tiny little chipmunk ran and started to eat from my hand. I think it was really an exciting part of the story, so I'm going to add an exclamation mark here. A tiny little chipmunk ran and started to eat from my hand. It was exciting, so it needs an exclamation mark. Okay, a tiny little chipmunk ran and started to eat from my hand. Now, looking here at my plan, I have one more part that I want to say about how it was fun. Okay, so now I can say that part. Feeding the chipmunks Feeding the Chipmunks was so much fun. Okay, and I think I'm going to end my story there. All right, so I have first started the writing process by planning out my story. I planned how my personal narrative was going to be about the time that I went and fed the chipmunks. So I planned out all of the different parts of feeding the chipmunks and what I wanted to say in my story. Next, I took these different parts and made them into sentences that made a story that made sense. Remember, we talked about how you can't just say, when you go to write your story, feeding chipmunks, hike, food, sit still, fun. Those aren't sentences. These are just the ideas that we had planned. You have to take your ideas and put them into a draft that has actual sentences, which is what I did. Okay, so I know this looks kind of long, but it is on giant paper, so if I had written it in my journal, it probably wouldn't be too terribly long. Yours may not be as long as mine, and that's totally okay, or it may even be longer than mine. As long as your story makes sense and it goes along with what you planned for your personal narrative, that's awesome. So today you're going to finish your draft. Remember, when you draft, we're not worried about spelling. We're just worried about getting your story out onto paper. Tomorrow, or not tomorrow, actually, next week, whenever we have our lesson, we're going to talk about how to revise your story. So you will need to finish your draft up today and then submit it with a picture or video, and I want to see your completed story. Okay, so it does need to be done today. That way, next week when we go to work on this again, you'll be ready to work on it the way that I'm going to be working on mine. All right, I can't wait to see your completed stories today.